Consequences. Carla watched Kaito walk out of the house, leaving her with a whirlwind of emotions. She couldn't deny the bizarre charm he exuded, even in the midst of their harrowing ordeal. As she leaned against the wall, her thoughts swirled with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and something she didn't want to admit to herself. She thought about her husband Grisha, the man she had been married to for years. The man who was brave, dependable, and the father of her children. The guilt weighed on her as she remembered him, alone and scared, watching their home crumble. Eren and Mikasa, their children, were on that ship to Trost, far away from the chaos that is engulfing Shiganshina. As Carla pondered her marriage, the words, irresistible, echoed in her mind. Kaito's teasing had awakened something within her that she hadn't felt in a long time, a spark, a glimmer of desire. She hadn't allowed herself to think about such things since the day she became a mother and a wife. Her emotions were in turmoil, and as she replayed Kaito's playful advances in her head, she couldn't help but admit that a part of her found him intriguing, charming in a way she hadn't expected. But her loyalty to her family held her back, and she couldn't imagine betraying her husband. The afternoon sun cast long shadows in the abandoned house, and Carla sighed, allowing herself a moment to breathe. She wasn't sure what the future held for her or for the world outside, infested with titans. Her heart ached for her husband and children, but an undeniable curiosity about the enigmatic vampire who had saved her life tugged at her thoughts. As she closed her eyes, she tried to push away the romantic tension that had grown between her and Kaito during their time together. She needed to focus on survival, on reuniting with her family, and ensuring their safety. But as her heart raced and her mind danced with thoughts of the charming vampire, Carla knew that the events of this fateful day would leave a lasting impact on her, one that she couldn't easily forget. Kaito sat perched atop the crumbling building, watching the titans in the ditch as they futilely attempted to claw their way out. The chaos he had orchestrated unfolded before his eyes, and he couldn't help but feel a tinge of remorse for what he had done. His initial goal had been to obtain the essence of Diana Fritz, a person of royal blood, a key element for a plan he had in mind. But seeing Carla trapped under the rubble, her delicate face etched with fear, something within him had stirred, pushing him to intervene. He knew he shouldn't have let his emotions get the best of him, but he couldn't stand idly by and let her die. Kaito's actions always had consequences, and meddling with the course of events in this world was no exception. He had long since learned that causality was a force not to be trifled with. Every action he took, every alteration he made to the story's flow, invited repercussions. Kaito had been told long ago that this world was not the same as the one he knew from the show. Something far more malevolent is using this world as a breeding ground, to spread its roots and engulf the universe in darkness. That being said to him, it was a sinister force that operated beyond the understanding of mere mortals and even the supernatural. Kaito was an outsider in this world, a foreign element that the world didn't naturally accommodate. His mere presence disturbed the established causality, a web of interconnected events that dictated the fate of this realm. And as he changed the course of the story to suit his purposes, the retaliation from causality loomed ever larger. The more significant the changes he introduced, the more severe the retaliation. Kaito sat on the rooftop, contemplating the consequences of his actions. He had already made significant deviations from the original narrative. As he watched the Titans struggle in the ditch, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had unwittingly set in motion something far more significant than he had anticipated, something that might have consequences not just for him but for the entire world. 2 hours later, Kaito descended from the rooftop and returned to the old house where Carla had been waiting. Her eyes filled with relief upon his arrival, and she had gathered her belongings, ready to move on. "Are you ready to go?" Kaito asked, a sense of urgency in his voice. Carla nodded, her eyes still reflecting the fear she had experienced during their encounters with the Titans. "Yes, we need to leave this place before the Titans overrun it completely." Kaito grabbed his bag and slung it over his shoulder. "We can't stick around here any longer. The Titans will continue to spread between Walrose and Maria, and our chances of survival will diminish." Carla and Kaito mounted the horse they had come on, the two of them balancing precariously on the animal's back. The horse, already weary from their earlier escape, let out an exhausted snort but continued to carry them as they made their getaway. As they rode away from the village, Carla couldn't help but feel a mixture of gratitude and confusion. The events of the day had been nothing short of extraordinary, and her life had taken an unexpected turn. "Kaito," she began, her voice laced with curiosity, "I can't thank you enough for saving me from those Titans. But I still don't understand why you helped me. Why go to such lengths?" Kaito glanced at her with a playful smile, the shadows of his mysterious past still hidden. "Ah, Carla, you see, while I saved you, it comes at a price you might not like. Carla's eyes widened with surprise. A price? What do you mean? Kaito chuckled, well, my dear, you can't go back to your children and husband. For now, at least. Carla blinked, shocked by his words. What do you mean I can't go back? I have to find my family. They must be worried sick. Kaito raised an eyebrow and turned to her. Worried, yes. Sick. Well, they could be if you were to return and become Titan Chow. He winked at her with a mischievous glint in his eye. Carla's face flushed with anger, and she swatted his arm. Kaito, that's not funny. Kaito laughed heartily, enjoying the comedic tension between them. All right, I'm just messing with you, Carla. The truth is, you were not meant to live past that day. By saving you I have disturbed things I shouldn't have. Carla looked at Kaito with a mix of confusion and concern. What do you mean, I wasn't meant to live past that day? You're not making any sense. Kaito let out a sigh, his playful demeanor momentarily replaced by a more serious one. Carla, this world operates on certain rules and patterns. By saving you from those titans, I've disrupted the balance of things. There are consequences for that. Carla's eyes widened with realization. Consequences? What kind of consequences? Kaito hesitated for a moment before answering. I can't say for sure, but it might mean that your path has diverged from the one fate had in store for you. But no matter what, you cannot meet them. Carla's eyes welled with tears as the gravity of Kaito's words sank in. My children, my husband. I can't ever see them again. Kaito's expression softened as he looked at Carla. Carla, it's not that you can't see them again, but for now, it might be safer if you don't. The world is a dangerous place, and your family would be in danger if you were with them. My actions have put you on a different path. Tears welled up in Carla's eyes, and she bit her lip to keep herself from crying. I don't understand all of this, but I can't accept that I might never see my family again. Kaito didn't say anything, the silence lingering around them, ignoring the running horse of course. Kaito didn't let it slow down it even a bit, the poor beast whimpering in its mind. After what seemed like an eternity, Carla wiped away her tears with the back of her hand, her voice trembling. I can't believe this. What do I do now? Kaito took a deep breath, searching for the right words. For now, we keep moving forward toward Trost District. We'll figure things out as we go. Hey guys. Thanks for the support till now. I just changed the name of the fanfic from Spinal Bastard and its synopsis too, go check it out. Like it. Add to library. Your comment is the motivation for my creation. Give me more motivation. NightSpectra _ creators thoughts. 11 comments 0 vote. Journey to Trost. As Kaito and Carla made their way towards Trost District after their short respite in the abandoned village, Kaito couldn't help but notice Carla's rather distracted demeanor. It wasn't the time for daydreaming, and he couldn't resist poking a bit of fun. Carla, are you always this much of an airhead? He said, a teasing smile playing on his lips. Carla's face reddened in embarrassment. I can't help it. It's been a lot to take in. Kaito chuckled and decided to ease her embarrassment by answering her questions. Well, speaking of taking things in, you really should check your legs. Carla looked down and let out a small shriek of surprise. My legs. They're fine. Kaito laughed at her realization. I'm amazed you didn't notice earlier. Carla was still awestruck by her restored legs, feeling like she'd been given a miracle. But how? Why? Kaito gave her a half-truth, trying to keep some of his true nature under wraps. Let's just say I have some unique talents that extend beyond defeating titans. As for your legs, well, think of it as a side effect of my powers. Carla wasn't entirely convinced but decided not to push further. She had more questions, though, and she turned her attention to Kaito's unusual appearance. What about your hand back in Shinganshina? It rotted, but then a new one grew out, and what happened to your hair? She asked, a mix of curiosity and confusion in her voice. Kaito grinned mischievously, knowing he couldn't reveal the whole truth. Ah, that's a fun story. You see, my hair decided it was time for a change of style, and my hand was just playing hide and seek. Carla raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying his playful explanation. Kaito, you can't fool me with that nonsense. What's the real story? Kaito leaned in closer, still teasing. Well, I could tell you, but then I'd have to drink your blood. Just kidding. He laughed for a moment and then said. Nothing comes for free in this damn world, you see. That's why my hand died off, and courtesy of my vampiric regeneration, a new hand sprouted. The hair. For now, let's stick to my previous explanation. It's really too big of a revelation for you currently. Carla couldn't help but chuckle at Kaito's playful response, though a part of her still held a certain level of curiosity mixed with unease about his peculiar abilities. Nothing comes for free in this world, indeed, she agreed with a small smile. I guess I'll just have to accept these mysteries for now, along with everything else that's happened. Kaito leaned in even closer, his voice dripping with seduction as he teased, I can tell you everything you want to know, Carla, but we need to be very, very close. Like skin on skin close. Carla's heart raced at his suggestive tone, and she could feel her cheeks growing warm. The undeniable attraction between them was hard to ignore, and it stirred a sense of longing she hadn't felt in years. Her thoughts drifted to her husband and children, and she wrestled with her inner turmoil. Kaito, I'm married, she finally admitted, her voice trembling with hesitation. I can't betray my family. Kaito playful said, yeah, keep telling that to yourself. After that, Kaito didn't tease her more, for now. Carla Pav. Phew, that was close. Carla sighed with relief, grateful that Kaito hadn't pressed the matter. Even in a world overrun by titans and filled with uncertainty, there were still lines she was unwilling to cross. Carla couldn't help but wonder how long she could resist the allure and temptation of the enigmatic vampire traveling beside her. As they journeyed deeper into the unforgiving world of titans, the line between her duty to her family and her growing attraction to Kaito continued to blur. For now, she remained steadfast in her commitment to her husband and children, but with each passing moment, the future became increasingly uncertain. In a world where survival was a daily struggle and the unexpected was the norm, Carla couldn't predict what choices lay ahead or how her relationship with Kaito might evolve. As the world around them remained shrouded in darkness and danger, Carla couldn't escape the fact that she was also navigating a perilous path within herself, torn between her responsibilities and the magnetic pull of the vampire at her side. 2 days had passed since Carla and Kaito had left the abandoned village behind. The journey had been surprisingly free of titan encounters, much to Carla's relief. The world around them was desolate and eerie, yet the absence of titans was a small blessing in these trying times. As they continued their travel, Carla's insistence on warning the villages they encountered became a regular routine. They shared news of the impending titan invasion, hoping to save as many lives as possible. Some villagers believed their warnings and prepared for the worst, while others dismissed the information as mere superstition. During these arduous days of constant travel, the toll of sitting on horseback became increasingly evident. Carla's body, unaccustomed to such rigorous journeys, began to rebel. Her legs and hips ached, and the physical strain became nearly unbearable. With each passing mile, the pain in her muscles and bones intensified, and it was only a matter of time before she could no longer endure the discomfort. Finally, on the third day, Carla's body reached its limits. She could neither sit astride the horse nor bear the weight of her own body to walk. Her legs refused to cooperate, rendering her immobile. In a world where every step counted and time was of the essence, Carla's inability to move was a significant setback. That led to the current situation. Kaito was now walking with the reins of the horse in one hand, but the other hand was occupied in a very different manner. Carla, her legs no longer able to support her, found herself on a piggyback ride with Kaito. Her entire upper body was snugly pressed against Kaito's back, and her heart raced as her breast slightly grazed his back. She couldn't help but blush deeply from the closeness of their bodies. Carla's legs were wrapped securely around Kaito's waist, and to support her securely, Kaito's hand found its place beneath her. Well, a place that only added to her blush. This hand placement, however, was causing an entirely different set of sensations for both of them. Carla's face was flushed with embarrassment as she clung to Kaito, acutely aware of the contact and the intimate positioning. Kaito, on the other hand, couldn't resist a playful grin, enjoying the blush that had overtaken Carla's face. He kept walking, offering his own unique form of support while teasing her with the undeniable closeness of their bodies. Carla's internal struggle grew with each passing moment. The hours rolled on, and the constant physical proximity to Kaito, the sensation of his body moving beneath her, was affecting her in ways she had not anticipated. Her commitment to her husband and children was unwavering, but the temptation grew stronger with each passing day. She tried to focus on her family, reminding herself of her love for them, but the relentless closeness was making it increasingly difficult to keep those thoughts at the forefront of her mind. Carla knew she should not be feeling the way she was, yet her willpower was slowly waning. Carla's heart felt like a battlefield, and the voice of temptation was slowly overpowering her, whispering that she deserved to embrace these stolen moments of passion. She felt guilty and ashamed but was finding it harder to resist the allure of the situation. And like that the night came. The steam intensifies. Warning for readers, lemons ahead. Your comment is the motivation for my creation. Give me more motivation. NightSpectra _ tot creators thoughts. 4 comments 0 vote. Under the moonlight 18+. Carla and Kaito found themselves in an uncomfortable situation as night fell. Unlike previous days, there were no nearby settlements to take refuge in, leaving them with no choice but to share a makeshift tent. The small confines of the tent made the atmosphere inside volatile, exacerbated by the close contact they'd had all day. Carla lay in the small tent, her heart racing, and her senses on high alert. The day's constant physical contact with Kaito stirred feelings and desires she couldn't fully control. With the tent now enveloping them in darkness, she was aware of every breath, every rustle, and every movement. Her mind battled with her desires and her moral compass. As she lay there, her back against Kaito's, Carla felt a sense of unease mixed with a growing anticipation. The close proximity had been maddening, and she found herself yearning for something she knew she shouldn't. Then, to her surprise, she felt Kaito shifting slightly, his body moving away from hers. Carla felt an unexpected pang of emptiness, and she scolded herself for having such thoughts. But her internal struggle was far from over. Her heart skipped a beat as she suddenly realized that Kaito's hand was resting on her waist. The touch sent shivers down her spine, and her breath hitched. Panic and desire wrestled within her. It must be a mistake, she told herself. He's sleeping. As his hand continued its slow ascent, she couldn't contain her anxiety and whispered, "Kaito, are you awake?" Her voice quivered as she sought reassurance, but there was no response. What should I do? I can't believe this is happening, her mind raced. Carla's breath hitched as Kaito's lips grazed her earlobe, sending waves of pleasure coursing through her body. His warm breath danced across her skin, igniting sensations she'd long forgotten. She quivered as he continued to kiss and nibble her ear, his seductive actions captivating her entirely. Kaito's hand reached her chest, and the world around Carla seemed to fade into a blur of desire. She gasped as he gently cupped one of her breasts, his fingers teasingly tracing circles over the fabric of her clothing. Her suppressed moan escaped her lips as her body responded to his touch, betraying her rational thoughts. Carla's inner struggle raged on, torn between the undeniable allure of the moment and the guilt that gnawed at her conscience. Her husband, her children, they weighed heavily on her mind, and she couldn't simply abandon them. Yet, Kaito's advances had awakened desires she hadn't felt in years. No, this is wrong. Kaito whispered back, "Shish, just feel it." Kaito's lips continued to explore her neck, sending jolts of pleasure down her spine. The hand on her breast squeezed gently, and her resolve faltered further. She wanted to push him away, but the delicious torment of his touch was overwhelming. Carla was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The guilt of betraying her marriage battled with the intoxication of the moment. She lay there, unable to move, her heart pounding as Kaito's hand continued its journey. As Kaito's lips descended to her collarbone and his hand maintained its gentle grip on her breast, Carla found herself unable to resist the overpowering allure. She let out another stifled moan, her nails lightly grazing Kaito's back in response. "Kaito, we shouldn't. This is wrong." Kaito's voice, a seductive whisper, danced in her ear as he responded, his warm breath sending shivers down her spine. "Sometimes, Carla, you have to embrace the moment. Forget about your husband and children for now. Let yourself feel." Kaito gently turned Carla's body to face him, and with their eyes locked in a passionate trance, he leaned in and pressed his lips to hers. Carla hesitated briefly, her conscience waging war against her desires. But then, she succumbed to the irresistible pull of their intimacy. As the minutes passed, Kaito's actions grew bolder and more intoxicating. His lips left hers and trailed down her neck, planting soft kisses that sent shivers of pleasure coursing through Carla's body. His hands explored every curve, every inch of her form, igniting a passion within her that she never knew existed. Carla's breath quickened, her hands tentatively finding their way up Kaito's body, tracing the contours of his muscular chest. She felt his heart pounding beneath her touch, mirroring the erratic beat of her own. Kaito's lips and tongue moved further down, teasing her collarbone, chest, and lower. He unbuttoned her blouse with a seductive slowness that tormented and delighted Carla. As her blouse fell open, he kissed the exposed skin, sending waves of pleasure rippling through her. His fingers deftly unhooked her bra, and Carla gasped as the cool air met her aroused flesh. "What a beautiful pair," Kaito gasped as he saw the pair of boobs laying in front of him. Carla shifted her eyes in embarrassment. His one hand grasped the left boob while the other boob was left at the mercy of his mouth. He gave a quick lick at her nipples. Carla couldn't suppress the moan due to the sudden attack. Covering as much of the breast he could in his mouth, he looked up at Carla. Her face was rosy, her eyes clenched close. Kaito wasn't any better, the softness of her breast beyond what he could imagine. He sucked the nipples relentlessly while also giving small bites in between. He could feel Carla's body squirm underneath him, and that gave him a sadistic pleasure. HNGN. Suddenly her body started quivering rapidly. Kaito, stop. Instead of stopping, he increased the intensity. She tried to weakly push him when suddenly her hand which was gripping Kaito had tightened its grip. Kaito felt her whole body stiffening for a moment before her hands fell loose. She was heaving heavily, the foreign sensation just too much for her body. What was that? She asked in confusion. Raising his head to meet her eyes, he said with a sultry voice, that, my dear, is called an orgasm. With that said, he wrapped her lips in his for another kiss, this time more passionate than before. His tongue broke in inside of her mouth, making her eyes widen, before wrapping around her tongue like a snake. Without a respite, it played with her like a toy. His tongue explored every nook and crevice of her body. Meanwhile, his hand was on a mission of its own. Moving carefully, he grasped her ass, fondling it to his satisfaction, before moving inside her clothes. When Kaito's hand touched her bare skin of butt, Carla felt an electrifying sensation run across her body. Breaking the kiss, Carla said in a whimpering voice, Kaito, we can't. While squeezing her bare ass, Kaito said, if you don't want this, then why are your hands hugging my body? That is. Carla grew silent again. Without wasting any time, Kaito undressed her lower body. Carla could do nothing but close her eyes at the inevitable. She couldn't deny that a part of her was anticipating what was happening. His hands traced her lower lips over her panties, making her quiver at every touch. TCH Carla, you say no yet you are so wet. Carla felt like it would be better if the sky ate her because the embarrassment her own body was giving her was too much. I was thinking of going down on ya, but it appears you won't be needing that anymore. She heard the sound of clothes being unworn, making her open her eyes. She saw a vague silhouette of a brave warrior twitching in anticipation. Seeing that she froze, the reality of what she was doing drawing upon her. She became extremely nervous, the guilt of betraying her husband tugging her mind. Kaito, listen. This isn't right, a quiet whisper came from her. We mustn't go anymore, her voice and determination broke down the more she said. Suddenly Kaito pressed his body on her and whispered in her ears, the hot breath tickling her skin. Aren't you too late to say that? He nibbled on her ears again, making her dizzy again. Naked, blushing, and wet beyond measure, those words don't suit you my love. His hands moved, sliding her panties aside, revealing her glistening wet cunt. Without any time wasted, Kaito aligned his dick with her its destination, his vampiric sight laying a vital role. When the tip of his dick touched her pussy, Carla's mind was pulled out from the hazy pleasure as she realized what was touching her. She panicked, Kaito, we shish on. Her reluctance turned into a moan as the dick easily slid inside her pussy, encountering no resistance, thanks to her love juices. The insides of her cave gripped his dick so tightly that Kaito felt he would come right away. Still controlling himself, he whispered again. I am moving now, not allowing even 1 second for her to catch her breath, he pulled back and slammed his hips on hers again. Carla's mind went blank from the immense pleasure coursing through her body. With a rhythmic motion he kept moving his hips, while his hands played with her boobs and his tongue grazed around her nape. Kaito on. Swap on. Pleasure built up in his body as the eventual release came close and closer. Carla also felt like a volcano inside her was getting filled up every second. The feeling of his dick teasing her inner walls again and again left her wanting for more, yet her shame couldn't allow her to say it out. She didn't know when, but her body had also started moving. Her hands wrapped around Kaito's torso, while her fingers left marks all over him. She had wrapped her legs around his hips, not allowing him to escape by any means. HNGG. Carla, I am getting closer. Carla wasn't listening at all, her mind gone hazy from all the pleasure. I am coming. Her mind cleared for a moment, and her eyes cleared a bit on hearing his words. Not in Sia. Alas, her words were in vain. Kaito slammed his hips one last time, his dick reaching the deepest recess of her cunt and releasing the cum. The hot thick fluid flowing in her broke the camel's straw as the volcano of pleasure inside her erupted in all its glory. Her muscles contracted, which made her grip around him stronger, both outside as well as inside. Her eyes, which had just been full of panic, were not clenched shut, while her mouth was desperately trying to stifle her moans. After 10 seconds or so, her grip loosened and Kaito fell on top of her, enjoying the soft sensation on his chest and his neck buried in her nape. It's been some minutes while they lay in the same position when Kaito felt her breathing slowing down. Looking at her face, he realized she had fallen asleep. 2 streaks of tears flowed down her sleeping face. Wiping those tears, he lightly kissed her cheeks before burying his face in her chest. A moment later, he too fell asleep, buried in the mountain of flesh. Damn. I really went too much here. It's the longest chapter currently, sitting at 1.85k words. Your comment is the motivation for my creation. Give me more motivation. NightSpectra _ taught creators thoughts. 2 comments 0 vote. The morning after rain. Carla awoke, her eyes fluttering open and her consciousness slowly returning. As she looked around, she found herself in the makeshift tent, naked and in the embrace of an equally naked Kaito. The memories of last night rushed back to her. Carla lay there in a tangle of emotions, her mind in turmoil. She was entangled in a web of shame and guilt over the choices she had made the previous night. The betrayal to her husband, the forsaking of her marriage vows, and her surrender to her desires all weighed heavily on her conscience. Desperately, she tried to slide out of Kaito's embrace, hoping to extricate herself from the tangle of their naked bodies. But as she inched away, Kaito's grip tightened, pulling her even closer to him. Her heart raced as her body pressed against his, and she felt his warm breath on her neck. Carla was torn. She wanted to escape from this intimate entanglement, the proof of their reckless passion, yet she also feared what would happen when Kaito awoke. The look in his eyes, the judgment or understanding she might find there, was a source of unease. As she hesitated, Kaito shifted in his sleep and, without fully waking, drew her even nearer to him. His arm around her waist became a firm and possessive embrace. Carla's heart pounded in her chest as she lay trapped in his hold. For a brief moment, she considered waking him herself, taking control of the situation before it grew any more complicated. But as she looked at his peaceful slumber and the faint smile playing on his lips, she couldn't bring herself to disturb him. Instead, she remained still, wrestling with her own emotions and anxieties. The morning sunlight filtered through the makeshift tent, casting a warm glow on their entwined bodies. Carla closed her eyes, grappling with the consequences of her actions, knowing that she would soon have to face the reality of her choices. Carla's inner turmoil only intensified as she lay there, trapped in Kaito's embrace. She couldn't help but replay the events of last night in her mind, each memory like a dagger to her conscience. She was trying to muster the courage to wake Kaito or find a way to slip out without disturbing him, but her every movement was cautious, afraid of how he might react. A while later, Kaito stirred and gradually opened his eyes. His gaze met Carla's, and instead of the awkward tension she had expected, she was met with a warm and genuine smile. His eyes twinkled with a mix of playfulness and affection. "Good morning," he greeted her, his voice soft and inviting. Carla couldn't help but be taken aback by his reaction. She had anticipated that he would act distant or awkward, but his warm smile disarmed her, leaving her at a loss for how to respond. "Morning," she replied hesitantly, a knot of guilt still twisting in her stomach. She couldn't look him in the eye, her own smile forced and uncertain. Kaito's warm demeanor didn't waver, though a hint of mischievousness danced in his eyes. He reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind Carla's ear. "I hope you slept well." Carla couldn't help but blush at the touch and struggled to maintain her composure. Despite her reservations and guilt, she couldn't deny the allure of Kaito's charisma. The morning light was more revealing than Carla had anticipated, and the awareness of her own nakedness sent a shiver down her spine. As her eyes traveled over Kaito's chiseled abs and lean, muscular body, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She had been so lost in the moment's intensity last night that she hadn't taken in the full sight of him. Her heart raced as her gaze ventured lower, and she found herself overwhelmed by the memory of their passionate encounter. The forbidden nature of it all only added to her sense of guilt and confusion. She couldn't help but wonder how she had allowed herself to be consumed by desire, betraying her husband and forsaking her marriage vows. Carla's thoughts were interrupted when she noticed that Kaito was watching her. His hungry, passionate gaze bore into her, leaving her feeling exposed and vulnerable. Feeling embarrassed and self-conscious, Carla hastily slipped out of the tent. Kaito didn't follow her immediately, giving her some much-needed space to collect her thoughts and emotions. Still, inside the tent, Kaito listened carefully for any signs of danger that might arise with Carla alone outside. He couldn't deny that he had thoroughly enjoyed their passionate night together. Carla's sweet expressions and reluctance had only heightened the intensity of their encounter. Carla hastily put on her clothes, her face still flushed with embarrassment and her mind a whirlwind of confusion. She couldn't quite believe the events of last night, how passion had taken over her reason and led her into the arms of a man who was, in essence, a stranger. Outside the tent, she took a few deep breaths to steady herself, her thoughts scattered. Her guilt pressed down on her, and she couldn't help but feel that her actions had irrevocably changed her life. She was married, a mother of two, and the betrayal she had committed gnawed at her conscience. Kaito emerged from the tent, dressed in his shirt and pants. He watched Carla with a knowing look, his eyes carrying a mixture of amusement and desire. Clearly, he didn't share the same sense of guilt to the previous night's events. "Carla, are you okay?" She hesitated momentarily before responding, "I'm just trying to make sense of everything." Kaito approached her with a concerned expression. "Last night was intense. I don't want you to regret it." Carla looked into his eyes, a swirl of emotions in her own. "I don't know how I feel, Kaito. I need time to figure things out." Kaito nodded understandingly. "I respect that. Our situation is far from ordinary. Just know that I'm here for you, no matter what." Carla's gaze softened as she looked at him. "Thank you, Kaito." As they continued their journey toward Trost District, Carla couldn't escape the heavy weight of her thoughts and emotions. She had decided against getting on Kaito's back again. Instead, she informed Kaito that her legs were better and, albeit with some difficulty, they mounted the horse together. The horse trotted along, the landscape passing by in a blur. Carla's heart was heavy with guilt and confusion, and she stole occasional glances at Kaito, who seemed unperturbed by her sudden change of behavior. She had so many questions, but she was also afraid of the answers. Trost District was drawing nearer and, with it, a new chapter in their journey. Kaito and Carla approached the wall guard, who looked at them curiously. Kaito stuttered, playing his role as the scaredy cat, "Excuse me, sir, but we barely escaped from Shinganshina and there were titans everywhere. It was a nightmare. We need to get inside." Carla had to suppress a chuckle at Kaito's antics. Internally, she couldn't help but roll her eyes. "Yes, indeed," she added, trying to sound serious. "We barely escaped with our lives. It was quite the harrowing experience." The wall guard listened attentively, and his expression shifted from curiosity to seriousness. "Shinganshina, you say? We've just received the news about the fall of Shinganshina a few hours ago. I'll have to mark your entry in the log." Kaito continued to play up his fear, his voice trembling. "I mean, those titans were huge, and their faces. Oh, the nightmares I'll have for weeks." The guard reached for a ledger and quickly recorded their names and the information they provided. "I'll mark your entry into the city. Go ahead. You're welcome inside." Now relieved but still pretending to be nervous, Kaito thanked the guard profusely. As they walked through the gate, Carla watched the entire exchange and couldn't help but tease Kaito. "You're quite the actor, aren't you?" Kaito grinned, the act now over. "Well, it was for a good cause. Plus, it's not every day you get to see me scared out of my wits. So are we getting that MILF anytime soon again? Time will tell. Your comment is the motivation for my creation. Give me more motivation." NightSpectra _tot creators thoughts. 1 comment 0 vote. When they meet. Kaito led Carla through the district's bustling streets, his confident stride and familiarity with the area put her somewhat at ease. She couldn't help but wonder if he had visited this place before, given his knowledge of the streets and the people. As they walked along, Kaito scratched his head and glanced back at the horse, who appeared quite displeased with the long journey. "Yeah, I've been here a few times for business," he said, trying not to let on about the horse's acquisition at the Survey Corps HQ. Carla arched an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "Business, you say? Is it the same kind of business you were involved in back in Shinganshina, distributing?" "Well, you know what I mean." Kaito chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "Oh, no, not that kind of business. It's something entirely different, I assure you." He glanced at the horse, hoping to change the subject. "Though, I did meet our noble steed during one of those visits." Carla couldn't help but laugh at his unease, her earlier apprehension giving way to amusement. "All right, I'll take your word for it. As long as you're not getting up to any more mischief here." Kaito winked playfully. "No promises, Carla, but I'll try to keep things under control." Carla was astonished as Kaito led her to a 2-story house within the bustling city of Trost. Neighbors greeted Kaito as they passed, further fueling her curiosity. Her jaw nearly dropped when Kaito unlocked the grand entrance and ushered her inside. The interior of the house was a stark contrast to the modest appearance from the outside. It was nothing short of a luxurious manor, with opulent furnishings, intricate decor, and a spacious layout that spoke of wealth and sophistication. Carla's eyes widened as she took in the grandeur of the place. Kaito, this is incredible, she said, still somewhat in awe of their surroundings. Kaito grinned proudly, I'm glad you like it. It's one of the perks of being a man of many businesses in this district. Carla couldn't help but wonder about the true nature of Kaito's businesses, but for now, she chose to focus on their present circumstances. This was a far cry from the hardships they had faced, and it seemed they were finally in a place of relative safety and comfort. As they explored the grand house, Carla couldn't shake the feeling that Kaito was harboring more secrets than he let on, but she decided to leave those questions for another time. Kaito had just shown Carla the house's lavish dining area when she couldn't help but ask about the ship he mentioned earlier, the one that carried Eren and Mikasa. Her voice quivered with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Kaito, when will the ship arrive? She inquired. Kaito turned to her, offering a reassuring smile. It shouldn't be much longer now. We'll keep an ear out for the news. And remember, you mustn't show yourself directly to them when they arrive. It's better if they don't identify you right away. Carla's eyes welled up with emotion as she questioned, but why? Why can't I just run to them, to Eren and Mikasa? They're my children. Kaito approached her gently, understanding the turmoil in her heart. I know it's difficult, Carla, but we discussed this before. You weren't supposed to survive the attack on Shiganshina. If they see you now, it might bring about unwanted complications. We have to be careful. Carla nodded, her eyes filled with tears. She knew that Kaito was right, and her unexpected survival had already created ripples in the fabric of fate. Her heart ached to see her children, to hold them in her arms, but she also understood the necessity of being cautious. With a deep sigh, she said, I know, Kaito, but it's so hard. My heart longs to be with Eren and Mikasa. Kaito smiled softly and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I understand, Carla, and I promise you'll get to see them. I have a plan. Just trust me and have a little more patience. As the day wore on, Kaito and Carla anxiously awaited the news of the ship's arrival. Kaito had a plan, and he wanted to make sure everything was in order. Finally, the message arrived, and Kaito knew it was time to reveal his strategy to Carla. Kaito's eyes sparkled with mischief as he quickly pulled Carla towards him and planted a soft, unexpected kiss on her lips. Carla's cheeks flushed with embarrassment and anger, and she took a step back, her voice trembling as she demanded, Kaito, what on earth do you think you're doing? Kaito chuckled and gestured towards a nearby mirror. Just take a look. Carla, still flustered by the sudden kiss, walked over to the mirror. When she saw her reflection, her eyes widened in disbelief. Her face, her hair, and her entire appearance had transformed. She barely recognized herself, as if she had become a different person altogether. She turned back to Kaito, her voice a mix of awe and confusion. How did this happen? I look completely different. Kaito grinned, revealing his sharp canines. This, my dear Carla, is one of the tricks of the vampire trade. It will be useful for our plan. Carla couldn't help but marvel at the incredible transformation she had undergone. With her new appearance, she looked nothing like the woman who had narrowly escaped the Titans in Shiganshina. Kaito leaned in, whispering the plan into her ear. Carla, you'll need to act as a relative of yourself in front of Eren and Mikasa. This way, you can meet them without any significant problems. She blushed a little, with Kaito being so close to her ears, she inadvertently remembered last night. She admonished herself for doing so. Kaito continued, not noticing Carla blush, but you must be careful, princess, you cannot let them find out you are their mom, is that a deal? Carla's heart raced as Kato's warm breath tickled her ear. She blushed even more at the nickname, princess, and his close proximity. She quickly shook off her lingering thoughts from last night and nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. I understand, Kaito. I'll do my best to keep my true identity hidden. Kaito smiled reassuringly and stepped back, putting some distance between them. Good. We can't afford any slip-ups. Carla took a deep breath, determined to follow the plan and see her children again. I'm ready, Kaito. Let's do this. As they stood on the outskirts of the bustling harbor, Carla's heart ached as her eyes met her children, Eren and Mikasa, on one of the ships. Eren seemed lost, his eyes vacant and tired, while Mikasa was her usual strong-willed self, protecting her brother in this chaotic world. Carla's instinct was to rush to them, to hold them and assure them that she was safe, but she remembered Kato's warning. Kaito pointed out Eren to Carla, helping her spot her son. Tears welled up in Carla's eyes as she watched him, yearning to embrace him, to tell him that his mother was alive. But she knew she had to be patient. Carla turned to Kaito, her voice trembling with emotion. Should I go to them, Kaito? Should I bring Eren and Mikasa with me? When Carla suggested bringing Eren and Mikasa with her, Kaito hesitated for a moment. He gazed at her with a mix of compassion and understanding. Carla, it's best not to change things too much. We must trust Hannes to take care of them as he should. You being with them now could have unintended consequences. You'll just make sure they're safe. Your identity cannot be revealed, not now at least. Carla nodded, accepting the wisdom in Kaito's words. She took a deep breath and wiped away her tears, determined to stick to the plan and reunite with her children at the right moment. You're right, Kaito. I trust you and your plan. Let's do this. With their resolve strengthened, Carla and Kaito continued to watch from a distance as the ships began to dock at the harbor, knowing that a reunion with her children was within reach but also aware of the delicate balance they had to maintain. I won't be coming with you, Kaito said, making Carla look at him in a bit in confusion. Scratching his head, Kaito continues, let's say your son won't like seeing my face. Ignoring him, Carla moved toward the big horde of people. As Carla made her way through the crowd towards Eren and Mikasa, she felt a mix of emotions churning within her. Seeing her children after so long filled her with both joy and trepidation. She had to remember to play her part as Carla's cousin, a role she had to perform flawlessly. She approached Eren and Mikasa cautiously, offering them a warm but unfamiliar smile. Eren, Mikasa, she began with an emotional catch in her voice, I'm Carla's cousin, Irene. She used to talk about you both in her letters all the time. She reached out and gently placed a hand on Eren's shoulder. Eren, still looking somewhat shell-shocked from the recent events, stared at Irene but didn't seem to recognize her. Carla's cousin? He repeated, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Yes, Irene continued, trying to sound as convincing as possible. I visited your family once when you were much younger, Eren. That's how I recognized you. Mikasa, always perceptive, asked, why are you here now, Irene? Did you hear about what happened in Shiganshina? Irene nodded, her eyes filled with feigned sadness. Yes, Mikasa, I heard about the Titans attacking. I was so worried about Carla, so I came here to check if she had survived. Eren's gaze seemed to linger on Irene, but he didn't voice his suspicions. Tears welled up in his eyes as he spoke, his voice shaking. My mom is. She's very likely dead. Irene felt her heart break for her son, but she maintained her facade. She nodded with sympathy. I'm so sorry to hear that, Eren. Losing a loved one is the most painful thing one can experience. Mikasa's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she placed a comforting hand on Eren's shoulder. We've been searching for her, but we couldn't find any sign of Mom. Irene placed a hand on her heart, trying to console them. It must be so hard for you both. I hope you find the answers you're looking for. Hannes' arrival interrupted their conversation. He emerged from the ship, his eyes falling on the suspicious woman who was deep in conversation with Eren and Mikasa. As he approached them, his protective instincts kicked in, and he stood between Irene and the children. Who are you, and what are you doing with these kids? Hannes asked, his voice firm and guarded. Carla maintained her calm facade, her false identity as Carla still intact. I'm Irene, Carla's cousin. I was just telling them that I came here to check if Carla had survived the Titan attack in Shiganshina. Hannes remained suspicious, his eyes scrutinizing her. He turned to Eren and Mikasa. You two, don't wander off with strangers. Come with me. Eren and Mikasa exchanged a quick glance before reluctantly nodding and following Hannes. Their departure left Carla feeling a mix of emotions, pride in Hannes for being vigilant in protecting the children, but also frustration that her reunion with her children had been cut short. Fucking hell, I have been awake for 2 days now. I just can't stop writing. With this I am done with 15k words. Finally I can get some reviews. I plead with you, my dear readers, give me a review or rating please. Your comment is the motivation for my creation. Give me more motivation. NightSpectra_tot creators thoughts. 3 comments 0 vote. Uncharted Waters edited. Disguised as Irene, Carla continued walking behind Hannes and the group, successfully maintaining her act. Seeing that she wasn't messing up, Kaito decided to let her be and return to the house. As he entered his room, he couldn't help but chuckle at the unusual decor. The walls were covered with half-naked pictures of anime girls, a quirky hobby he had indulged in during his free time. He wasn't about to share this with Carla, but these illustrations were the surprising source of his wealth. It was a bizarre thought. Hentai art remained in great demand, whether it was the modern-day Earth or this medieval-age apocalyptic world. Kaito couldn't help but find the humor in the fact that his peculiar talent had turned out to be so lucrative. Kaito quickly cleared the walls of the drawings, securing them underneath his bed to ensure Carla wouldn't stumble upon them. While most of his artwork was relatively normal, there were certainly a few pieces that ventured into more questionable territory. With those out of sight, he turned his attention to a large painting hanging in the room. With a push, he revealed a secret passage that had been hidden behind it. Kaito had often found himself in deep contemplation, well, as deep as a guy like him can get. He'd spend his free time pondering the nature of his abilities, like a philosopher with a side of vampire. See, his quest for that royal blood from Diana wasn't just about having a cool new hair color. Nope, it was all about discovering the secret power hidden within that special blood. You see, that royal blood was more than just a key to unlocking the founding titan, it had a hidden talent. It could do some remarkable genetic juggling, keeping his body in tip-top shape. Right now, he was a human-vampire mix, kind of like those Dampiers from Legends. All the vampire strength but none of their pesky weaknesses, like garlic aversion or a fear of sunlight. But there was a catch. His vampiric side hadn't fully merged with his human half yet. So when he overdid it on the super strength front, his human bits started throwing a fit and decided to throw in the towel, quite literally. It was like a bad case of cell mutiny. So, using too much vampire mojo ended up in some unfortunate rotting body parts. Today was a different story, though. Today, he had a vial of that fancy royal blood in hand, ready to give his body a little pep talk. He aimed to make his human side more vamp-friendly, so he wouldn't have to worry about losing limbs every time he flexed those super vampire muscles. Kaito continued on his path until he reached a hidden chamber, a place shrouded in secrecy that few knew about. The room was dimly lit, with streaks of sunlight piercing through openings in the roof. What was most striking about the chamber was its floor, which was covered in ancient circles etched with mysterious runes, as if drawn with dried blood. With deliberate steps, Kaito moved toward the center of the eerie pattern that dominated the chamber's floor. He inhaled deeply, the weight of his purpose pressing upon him. Slowly, he knelt down, taking great care not to disturb the ancient symbols. With unwavering determination, he squeezed his fingers tightly, willing his own blood to seep from both hands and fall onto the pattern below. As his life's essence dripped onto the floor, the entire pattern responded, casting an eerie red glow that seemed to absorb his very existence. You might wonder how Kaito knew how to create a blood magic circle. Well, he wasn't just messing around for the past 2 years. This endeavor had consumed an enormous amount of resources, time, and effort. And let's not even get into how he acquired the knowledge of blood magic, it was like a vampire thing, an instinctual understanding. Still, it took plenty of trial and error to make sure his little circle didn't turn into some eldritch summoning portal. One eldritch entity was more than enough for him to handle. Blood tendrils erupted from the ground, curling around Kaito's arms and solidifying to hold his hands in place. The ancient runes etched in the pattern appeared to come alive, moving in a mysterious and age-old rhythm. Kaito's eyes closed, but when they reopened, they revealed a startling transformation. Instead of the familiar sight of crimson irises, his entire eyes had turned into a blood-red sea. With the arcane ritual in full swing, Kaito chanted a series of incomprehensible incantations. His voice quivered with the intensity of the spell. Li JNSQO_QL. As he continued the chant, he could feel his own body undergoing a terrifying transformation. His skin melted in various places, blood oozed from his eyes, nose, and mouth, and even his hair fell away, leaving him with a bald, bloody head. An excruciating amount of pain coursed through his being, and the air was filled with his agonized screams. The ancient runes' glow intensifying as they wriggled and contorted, struggling to contain the overwhelming energy threatening to break the spell itself. @elst__R_. Time itself seemed to stretch, and it appeared that Kaito was teetering on the edge of death's abyss. Just when it seemed his life was on the brink of being snuffed out, something unexpected happened. The blood magic circle he had spent years crafting began to disintegrate into shards, and the crystalline restraints that held his hands shattered. Kaito's body was flung backward, crashing into the chamber wall. Kneeling on the ground, he spat out more blood, and the crimson sea in his eyes gradually receded into his pupils. A twisted smile played on his lips. While not a complete integration, the hybridization had certainly increased significantly. With his hybridization process significantly improved, Kaito felt like he had just upgraded his character in some bizarre video game. It was as if he unlocked a new skill tree, and the vampire-human hybridization skill was now buffed to a higher level. He was no longer that rookie with a fear of overusing his vampire side. Nope, now he was a more confident, maybe a bit cocky, hybrid vampire-human. He might not be ready to challenge Titans to a wrestling match just yet, but hey, he could definitely lift a few more boulders in the gym. And the best part? He had a whole new understanding of his body. It was like reading the instruction manual to himself. By training without relying on his vampiric attributes, he could level up his human side. It was the equivalent of doing push-ups for his humanity stat. The result? An increased upper limit of his true strength. If Kaito could high-five himself, he would totally do it right now. As his battered body lay sprawled on the chamber floor, its strength depleted, the vampiric regeneration he possessed slowly began its work. The miraculous ability worked to mend his wounds, but at a pace that tested his patience. Feels like I just had a wanking marathon. I had literally came back from ahead to change this chapter because I thought I had written something else here from what was in original draft. So how was the glimpse at his true powers? Your comment is the motivation for my creation. Give me more motivation. NightSpectra _ taught creators thoughts. Next chapter.